Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livius Nedden. This week, the book we're reviewing this week, we've been talking about for a year now.
Yeah.
And so we had Seth Harwood on, I think it was last February.
Yeah,
when he was putting
right
out
a year ago, yeah.
Yeah, he was putting out like a chapter at a time on his Patreon. And we've talked a little bit about it. So over the next two episodes, if any of this sounds familiar, it's not deja vu. You may have already heard it, but we're reviewing the Maltese Jordans, a book that we started talking about a year ago.
Yeah, and I was thinking, when I was reading, so I'm going back in time. We interviewed Harwood on January 22nd of 2018, so it's just over a year ago. And in that time, he's released, I don't know, all of the book, most of the book, a good chunk of the book. So what I'm getting at is I contribute to his Patreon, and so I have access to the feed where he releases chapters of his books, including Maltese Jordans. And I'm reading through the beginning of the book thinking, man, I could be skipping this if I just listened, as they were coming out. But lazy Rob didn't do that.
Yeah, but now Rob's, I'm going to get like a weird thing like, hey, there's this book I was thinking we should review, and I'm going to find out you've just been listening to it for 8 months on a Patreon page, and that's
yeah.
You're making me read it, but you're like doing it all from memory, listening like, while you're out jogging or whatever you do on your free time.
Well, I definitely don't jog.
If you jog, though, you know what you would need?
Serialized book to listen to.
And a good pair of sneakers.
And
we're going to talk a lot about sneakers, I feel, over this week and next week. So let me tell you what I mean. Tonight, we're going to review the Maltese Jordans. Next week, we're going to have Seth Harwood on for his 2019 appearance on this podcast, because I think we should at least make it an annual thing, if not more often.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to talk about not just this book, we're probably going to rehash and talk more about Sneds.
Yeah, Sneds.
Sneds.
We'll probably talk a little bit more about what that is.
We might.
I'm going to kick it off with a bio for Seth Harwood. For anybody who hasn't been listening to all of our episodes, Seth Harwood is the author of 5 novels and 2 collections of short stories. After stints in the commodities trading industry, rare book cataloging, and bartending, he attended the Iowa Writers Workshop. That's where he got his MFA, I believe, and he didn't say that for some reason. He now lives in central Massachusetts and teaches creative writing online for Harvard and Stanford. Find out more about Seth Harwood and the Jack Palms novels on his official website, sethharwood.com. I cut it off, but he also gives a link to his Patreon, and I think that's kind of his writing lifeblood right now, so you should check out Patreon and look Seth up over there, too.
More information about that next week, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Here is the synopsis. What if Michael Jordan played one secret pickup game in summer 1996 to pay off a debt so big it would get him banned from the NBA for life? What if that game was on a private court in Malta and Jordan's parting gift was a jewel-encrusted pair of Jordan 11s for the king? A pair of shoes so special and rare that they could be worth millions if they exist. Follow Jack Palms on a hunt from San Francisco to Hawaii and back across the country as he tracks the man who knows the truth about these shoes, a felon who just skipped bond to chase his dream, and the mythical pair of sneakers that can only go by one name. In the vein of Elmore Leonard and Carl Hiaasen, with touches of Bill Simmons and Rick Riley, Seth Harwood presents his next novel, The Maltese Jordans. Rob,
yes.
Out of those 4 people at the end, how many of those have you read books from? Not Seth Harwood, the other 4.
Damn it, I was going to say Seth Harwood. Nobody.
I read one
Elmore
Leonard book, yeah.
We read that
Well, I
Raylan
guess I read
book.
2, yeah. I read one of his books. It might have been Get Shorty. Like back when it came out as a movie, I read the book that the movie was based on, yeah.
Yeah, we suck.
I guess what I was going to say is we're not going to be able to speak to the Elmore Leonard, Carl Hiaasen, Bill Simmons, and Rick Riley.
Right.
Part, but we're going to talk a lot about the Seth Harwood part of this book.
Yeah, and I think it bears noting that this is a Jack Palms novel, so it's one in a series of books, but not like a continuous series. It's just like the type of series where like just books come out and this is the main character, right?
Yeah, like independent stories about the same character.
Yeah, you
it
said
feels
that way
like
better than I did.
it feels like there's things there, like characters that are mentioned that have a history with Jack, probably from the novels, but it did anyway. I don't feel impede my reading of it, which happens sometimes where you're like, oh, I feel like I'm missing something.
Right.
So it's our first Jack Palms outing. It's our first Seth Harwood outing.
Yeah, our first full-fledged, because really, it's kind of weird because Seth came into our life through that reading in 2012 where he read from, I think he read from Young Junius. And we recorded that and put that on the podcast. And then he joined us for the booked anthology in 2013, right? God, that's so long ago.
It's forever ago.
And he's been on, we interviewed him last year and stuff like that. So I think we've been more like off podcast related, like hanging out with Seth than on podcast. So this is a new turn for us.
It is, and one that I'm glad we finally took.
Yeah, for sure. Dude's got some writing chops.
He does, and we're going to talk about him right now. It's very aggressive. We're going to do it right now.
Weird, like clickbait, like anticipation shit.
Right. You won't believe what we thought of this book. Yeah. So the story kicks off with Jack, who to kind of set this up. From what I gather from reading this book, Jack was an action movie star some years ago. That went south and he fell on some hard times. And now he is taking on essentially bounty hunter jobs, like not like Boba Fett bounty hunter, but like Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Yeah, he is. He's not from space at all. But yeah, so nope. He has loose affiliations with a dude named Joe Leonardi. He's like a bail bondsman, but like it feels like there's more to that character. Like it goes deeper than just being like a straight bail bondsman.
Yeah.
Joe has put up the bond or whatever. I don't know what the language is, for a character named Meyer Modi, who, who's in trouble for embezzling, basically, who jumped bail, and Joe's hiring Jack to bring Meyer back to go to court.
Yeah, and it's going to sound like I'm getting really detailed here, but this is kind of the whole crux of the story. The first thing Jack does is he goes to Meyer's home, breaks in to do some investigating, and finds a room with a very expansive collection of sneakers. So we discussed this with Seth Harwood a year ago, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. There is a subset of people out there who spend a lot of time and money collecting gym shoes. And I say gym shoes because that's what we call them in the Midwest.
Didn't you get shit for saying that when we were talking to Seth last year?
I believe so, but in case there are people in the Midwest listening, I want them to understand what I'm talking about. So, sneakers.
You're playing with the home team here, I see. Yeah.
When I say sneakers, what I mean are shoes, by and large, styled specifically for athletes. And my belief is that mostly basketball players get this treatment. I mean, I'm sure it seems like any time I've ever heard somebody who was really into sneakers, it was Jordans, and then back in the day, when I was a youngin', you'd like Charles Barkley. I actually owned, I don't think I talked about this when we were on with Seth. I owned a pair of Patrick Ewing sneakers, apparently. They were fucking hideous. I'm going to try to find a picture of these because I don't know like what model they were or whatever. But for a little while, I was a pretty avid basketball fan. And this would have been in the very early 90s, early to mid 90s, I guess. And Patrick Ewing was one of my favorite players. And I happened to be in a sneaker store. I have it written on a Post-it note to keep saying sneakers. In a sneaker store. And saw a pair of Patrick Ewings, and I had to have them. So, yeah. Anyway, for the uninitiated, typically what happens is there's releases and there's special releases, and you go and you wait out at midnight like you would for concert tickets or beer, apparently. Another weird thing. And then like these, they sell out in like minutes. And then the secondary market is huge for people to trade these and to purchase them. And you can purchase sneakers from, $200 to $10, $12, $14,000. And as we're going to talk about in the case of Meyer Modi, perhaps in the millions.
Yeah. So before we dive into that, I want to do a little bit of an aside, because one of the most standout moments for me for when Jack goes to Modi's house and discovers the shoes is the little part of the story where Jack notices the router. Did that register much for you?
Yeah, that it's an Apple.
Oh, like the authenticity to what he said. I was like, this all checks out. So like, and it kind of made me nervous a little bit, because so basically, he's looking through the window. He notices like the router, that Modi's using is an Apple time capsule, which is a combination of a router and a hard drive that you can back your machine up to. And he's like, and he recognizes it and he knows that's what it is. And he's like, oh, I can just plug that into another computer and look through his files. And I was like, oh yeah, I never really thought about that. But like, I could break into someone's house and essentially dig through their backup, unless it was like, encrypted or whatever. And I was like, holy shit, that's like, it's clever and it's shockingly accurate. And I was very proud of him for writing that.
Yeah, I feel like, and this is not a criticism, but after talking to him about sneakers, I feel like he injected a little bit of himself into this book. So I will bet you, and we can remember to ask him, but I can nearly guarantee you that he has an Apple time capsule.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, it felt, there are a few times in the book where I was like, oh yeah, this is totally going on in dude's life.
The funny thing is, like, there was a couple of moments that I read what he described in a situation, very much mirrored like discussions he was having through social media and stuff about like his computer and things like that I remember, just from regular life. And I'm like, he adapted that into the book. That's interesting. So yeah, I agree with you. Like, some of this is coming from just a place of experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I want to give him credit, because one of the things I tend to dislike in books, and even call it on this podcast sometimes, is that thing where we ignore the obvious technology we just would have used that would have solved the problem that the author created. I don't think he did that here at all. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it felt like good everyday stuff that, like you said, like you're familiar with. I don't know. All I can tell you is Apple Time Capsule has been in the news a lot because of the Mueller investigation, of all things. Oh. There's a guy who's been charged, and every time he's in an interview, he's like, I gave them my time capsule. They could see every single thing I did for like 3 years. and like every interview he talks about this time capsule. You know what I mean? So even more genuine, because it's, currently, in a fairly big news story.
Oh, well, I missed that. That's funny.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But the shoes are a big thing. And I want jumping back while you were kind of explaining the rudimentary details of the weird shoe market. The Yeezys. I was thinking about the Yeezys.
Mm-hmm.
And those are apparently made by Adidas. So Jordans are Nike.
Correct.
And the Yeezys, which is like Kanye designed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Those are Adidas. So,
which are weird, because I don't think basketball players wear Adidas. I feel like they all
Yeezys don't really look
Reeboks,
like
Nikes.
Have you seen the Yeezys? Like, if Google them, because it looks like someone took like a house slipper.
Oh God!
And you know what I'm saying? Made it into a sneaker.
Looking now.
Although I don't know, the treads on the bottom look like they could be pretty rugged.
Yeah, they all look very low profile. That's why I said these are definitely not basketball shoes. These are like running shoes.
Yeah, or something. I don't know. But anyway, so this is our way of demonstrating the level of knowledge we have about the sneaker world. Even the way I say Yeezy is like, it's not casual like I say it all the time.
Uncomfortable. Yeah. So he in using the time capsule and a combination, I think, of that and Modi's computer, he decides that Modi likely went to Hawaii. So Jack Palms hops a plane, bills it all to his boss, his benefactor in this, and takes off to Hawaii, where he hopes to encounter Meyer Modi.
Yeah, and so it's at this point I just say, like, this is a pretty straightforward detective story. So it's really, I think it's first person the whole way through, right? So it's like he's telling you, and then I did this, and then I did that, like that type of narrative. And so we're just kind of following along with him as he gets to Hawaii and settles in and tries to start looking for leads. And the thing that I noticed about, like, this book, because I don't know the other Jack Palms book if it's similar, is he does the mundane detective work. Like, he doesn't do flashy stuff, and he doesn't know someone everywhere, and he's not a hacker or anything like that. He just kind of, like, looks around hoping someone knows something.
Mm-hmm.
Which I really appreciated.
Yeah, I think you're right about the detective story being fairly standard. But there are some really good things here, and I guess we should probably get more into the story before we start talking about, like, structure. But there are some things in this that I think he does differently, which are really interesting. And one of them is the fact that our detective is frequently recognized.
Yeah, low profile is a challenge.
Yeah, he, like, tries to, like, keep his head down and like do his thing, but it's like, every third person that he interacts with is like, hey, Jack Palms, hey dude, I loved you in whatever that movie was, you know what I mean, that kind of thing, which is it brings an extra level to the character that for me at least is previously, like, unseen in a detective novel. The detective always can lie about who he is. You know what I mean? And play a role, and Palms is not in that territory. Yep.
Yeah, which adds an interesting facet to it. Because, like, since he's a former actor, he has that kind of, not shame, but, like, self-awareness that he, he's not at his, his height, the height of his life or whatever. And he has to just kind of deal with living through that in the moment when people confront him about it and stuff. So kind of an interesting facet, but he gets into Hawaii and settles in, and in the course of his cursory investigation at the beginning, runs into Gina, who becomes actually a pretty big character in the book.
Yeah, she's kind of the love interest, for lack of a better term, and some kind of, like, somewhat sidekick. Yeah. To Jack's character. So he meets Gina, and through collecting some information, lo and behold, he catches on. He catches up to Modi, at least the first time, pretty quickly, which is not something that I expected from this type of book, right? I thought Modi would be, some elaborate, hard to find person all the way to the end. So on the island, through a little bit of rough housing with a source, he manages to find Modi, and Modi gets away. But eventually, and just to tighten up the story, he catches up with Modi, and this story is revealed to him about the Maltese Jordans. And I'm not going to go past what it says in the actual synopsis, but essentially Modi claims to have the Maltese Jordans. That the shoes that were made specifically for Michael Jordan by Nike to present as a gift to the king of Saudi Arabia, for whom he played a secret game back in the 90s. I was watching basketball around that time, so anything they talked about in basketball around that time felt very, very genuine. Now, did Michael Jordan play for this? I don't know. We're going to ask Seth Harwood that. I don't know if there are actual rumors about that. But, like, players that were named and things that were going on in the NBA at that time all felt very genuine. What happens is Jack is paid to bring this guy back. So he wants to do that. But he starts, much like Rob and myself, to get sucked in to the world of sneakerheads. Right? Yeah. Like, so as a kid... and this is another, like, I feel like this is Seth Harwood injecting himself. Like, as a kid, he, like, owned some shoes, and he was kind of envious of, like, the really expensive shoes and stuff. And here he is presented with the fact that there might be this mythical pair of shoes, and he kind of just wants to, like, get a look at them. But he totally gets sucked into the SNED, short for sneakerhead, lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah, and so we're probably towing the line of spoilers. I don't know if we're going to do spoiler talk or not, but from here it becomes all about who has the Maltese Jordans, which it's not the only name. Depending on who they're talking to throughout the book, there's other kind of nicknames for it, like what is it called? The Saudi set was one name. Mm-hmm. And there's like 4 or 5 different things that they go by, but for the sake of the book, and the thing they're most commonly referred to is the Maltese Jordans. So it's who's got it, who's doing what with them, and what's the plan, and what are they worth, and like digging deeper into the mythology of these shoes, and everybody kind of having the dollar signs in their eyes a little bit, but still somehow being in awe of this like profoundly rare pair of sneakers that, you know, only existed in myth up until this point.
Right. So to recap a little bit, we have Modi, who's on the run and wanted by several different groups of people. On top of that, he claims to have access to these shoes that now become wanted by another set of people. So there is that little bit of, I don't know, like there's always like those types of movies and
like
books,
Snatch.
I guess. But yeah, where there's a bunch of people all looking for the same thing. Yep. And that happens in this book, but in kind of 2 different ways. So there's the group of people who are looking for Modi, who are Jack Palms, who's supposed to bring him in, another bounty hunter who is called in because Jack's not doing the job quickly enough, a group of Hawaiian guys that Modi owes money to, and the mob because that's who he embezzled.
Yep.
And through the course of this, a bunch of people are also trying to get the shoes, which are some of the same people and some different people. You know what I mean? So it's not as chaotic as I'm expressing it, but it's intricate enough that you have a good story, but not to the point where it's hard to follow or anything like that.
Yeah, totally. So can before I forget, and I don't know if you'll pick this up, but I have to give Seth credit for. So I think the book is in 4 parts, if I remember correctly. And at the beginning of each part, there is a quote, and it's a sneaker-based quote. The first quote of the first part is from a song that I recognize, and the quote is, "I'll kill you if you try me for my Air Max 95s." Is that quote familiar to you, Livius?
Not even a little bit.
That is a song called, I think it's called Hate It or Love It by The Game, who was a rapper that came up. So after 50 Cent became popular, he introduced a whole bunch of people onto the scene. So basically, like, Dr. Dre broke Eminem into the scene. Eminem broke 50 Cent into the scene. 50 Cent brought on a bunch of people, including The Game. And one of the Game songs was Hate It or Love It, which he sings with a bunch of people, including 50 Cent. And one of the lines in there is, "I'll kill you if you try me for my Air Max 95s.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I had no idea about essentially anything you just to be honest. So I didn't know that Dr. Dre broke Eminem. Like, I know Dre from back in the NWA days. You know what I mean? Like, but
he signed Eminem. He brought him on. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and then Eminem is the one who signed 50 Cent, and then on and on. So it's like, I mean, if you think about just those 3 people and how significant a role they played in like
for sure,
late 90s to early 2000s rap scene, that was everything. So anyway, that's kind of an aspect of Seth as well, is his love of like rap and hip hop and stuff like that. For me, it was a little charming that he was throwing out lyrics by The Game at the beginning of his book.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I know story-wise, it's tough because you don't want to reveal a whole lot about any of this. So I think we might be essentially done talking about story. What I do want to say, and this is what I was kind of alluding to earlier, not only is Jack Palms a super interesting character in his the fact that he's recognizable as an actor, but nobody knows what he's doing now. Like, everyone just sees him and assumes that he's there. For example, when he's in Hawaii, they're like, "Oh, are you here shooting for a movie?" You know, he's at another place. They're like, "Oh, are you the talent?" You know, like the like celebrities at like a convention or whatever. So, so nobody knows that he's a bounty hunter. which is interesting. But the thing I liked is, I don't know how to say this because I'm afraid this is going to sound, no matter how I say it, like I'm taking a shot at the storytelling. But we have a bounty hunter who, I'll contrast this to the last book that we reviewed, which was also about detectives, right? The Nice Guys?
Yeah.
There was a lot of mortal danger in Nice Guys, or at least we were led to believe. You know, there was the one character was, fell off a building. I mean, a variety of things happened, right? I didn't feel like in this book that it took itself that seriously. Like, even though, like, on the rare occasion, like a gun pops up, I don't feel like Jack ever felt like he was in danger. And an interesting thing that happened is like this. There's a conflict between myself and Rob. And there's like we get into a fist fight because we're on opposite sides of the thing. But at the end, we wind up basically kind of collaborating or working together. It's like once you get past that, you have like perfectly reasonable people. So there's no one in this book that's like constantly trying to murder Jack or Modi or whatever. And I felt like it was just a probably more realistic than the immediacy to kill anybody who stands in your way, which is what you see in a lot of books. But I also think it made it more fun to see these people who are at odds with one another, even if it's not that they're working together, that they're able to carry on a conversation. Mm-hmm. Which, like I said, is not. I don't know. It felt a little lighter than other. And I know it's not supposed to be a detective book or whatever, but essentially we'll call it that. It just felt like it had a lighter touch to it, which was kind of refreshing.
I can't tell you how happy I am that you brought this up, because if you didn't, I was about to. And that was one of the, if you ask me, the best parts of the storytelling / narrative things of this book was how real it was. And like, let's jump back in time 432 episodes to our review of The Mozart Conspiracy by Scott Mariani, where the motherfucker's like jumping out of helicopters and there's like explosives everywhere. There's so over the top, and I was like, it was fucking like ridiculous. And it so took away from the story. And it's not to say that there's not action in this book. I think that there's regular beats of action throughout the book. There's fighting and there's, like chases and things like that. Those things happen, but in a way that like Livius and I would do it if we were a little more skilled with the fighting. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like much more of an average person, not some weird superhero that you see in action movies these days. So the action was refreshing in as much as it was down to earth. And there wasn't shooting all the time and breaking people's necks and like stuffing someone in a closet and stuff like that. It was just, I fought as much as I needed to get what I needed, and then I moved on. And like you were saying, like Modi teams up with some people, borrows some money from some people, and then there's like conflict that comes from that. And so throughout the book, like Livius was saying, sometimes there's confrontations between these people, but when that kind of action resolves itself, then it's just back to like, deep down they generally like each other. They just don't, they're just trying to get over on each other at, like for selfish reasons or whatever, but it comes back to more or less camaraderie. And that's great because you don't really see that. Like, it has to be like the good guy versus the bad guy. And this is more, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. People with conflicting interests, which is so real. Yeah.
Yeah, but like I said, but delivered in a way that nobody is trying to like murder somebody through the whole book.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, you betrayed me, now I have to kill you. It's like, wait, I owe you money and your mom's hitting me with her shoes kind of thing. Like, it's just so real and so just, and in a way where this could be a TV, like a network television series.
Sure, for sure. Absolutely.
Because it doesn't throw like murder and gore in your face at all.
Nope. No. And that's like I said, it's when I started, because I listened to the first few chapters when we had Seth on last year. Mm-hmm. And I thought this is going to be someone's going to get killed and there's going to be constant gun. Like, that's the feeling I had about the book. Like you said, I think there might even be, I don't even know if it's a chase scene, but it's kind of like it's kind of like the white Bronco chase scene. If it, more
Right.
than the like if you were filming this as a movie, it would probably be a very boring chase scene. It wasn't boring to like read it, but it wouldn't be like this high action kind of, like they're driving across sand, like not very fast. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So I found that to be super, super refreshing. And I'm curious as to if this is a overall, like the Jack Palms books kind of have that same feel, or if this is a step away from his previous Jack Palms books. So that's a question we'll probably be asking next week.
Yeah. But absolutely one of the most like refreshing parts of the way that the story is told is just the everyman approach that he takes to all the characters until the end.
Right. So we can't talk about the end, but I do want to say that the end was very, very rewarding. Like the story got tied up in a way that I really appreciated. Because in any book like this, right? So you have to ask yourself the whole time, right? So are these mythical sneakers real? If they're real, who's going to end up with them? What's going to happen to them?
Yep.
Are they going to be lost forever in a fire? Are they going to be, whatever? Like you have these thoughts, and my mind did not go in any way, shape, or form to how this situation gets resolved. But when it was resolved, I was like, this is done perfectly. Like a perfect resolution. And I don't often feel that there's a perfect resolution in books. Sometimes, and we've talked about on the show, where I was like, that shit ended weak. Like cop-out endings is one of my biggest pet peeves. And there are books that I have read that I've really, really liked. And then at the end, I'm like, I just wish you would have finished stronger. Like this one finishes strong, but like in a really good way.
Yep. I fully agree.
So, yep.
You do spoiler talk?
I'd love to do spoiler talk.
Right.
Spoiler talk is available for our Patreon subscribers at patreon.com/booked. It's where Rob and I go to discuss the ending of the Maltese Jordans and anything else in the book that we didn't want to spoil. We do this not just for this book. We do it for a number of books. So if you're not contributing, $1 a month gets you access to spoiler talk and our gratitude, which is really invaluable. Like spoiler talk is cool, but our gratitude is really where the value is in your $1 per month. So if you're not contributing, please do so. Take a moment to do it now. We'll wait.
All right. We are back from spoiler talk. It was a short spoiler talk, but we talked about some very important, very spoilery things. So if you have not already chosen to contribute $1 or more a month to our Patreon, patreon.com/booked, throw in that $1 a month and you get access to all of the spoiler talk, which by now has to be creeping up on the triple digits. We've been doing that for quite a while now.
There's no way. Really?
All right. I don't know. I just want to make sure.
All right. Okay.
There's got to be, it's got to be close to 50.
So Rob, you're a little more familiar with this. What is the availability of this book right now?
So the book is out now. And this is one of the things where typically we just say, go pick it up on Amazon, blah, blah, blah. But Seth is doing this really cool thing. So you can get the ebook on Amazon easy if that's what you want to do. If you want to get a print copy, he is selling them through his website, sethharwood.com. You can order, one book. You can order multiple copies. You can also order signed copies, and he gives you the option to leave instructions about how you want it signed, which I think is cool because, like, if you don't live in Western or Central Massachusetts or whatever he said he lives, how are you going to get a signed copy of this book, right? So you go to his website and you pay like the regular price for a book, and you just tell him how you'd like it to be personalized, and he sends it off to you. So I think that's a unique thing that we don't see authors doing much, but I think it's really cool.
I mean, I'm not really done talking about the book, but to touch on that, it really feels like Seth is pretty close and always open and available to talking to his fans, which is something that I've always respected about him. And I'm not saying that other people aren't. They all have a Facebook presence. I'm sure they respond to posts and whatnot, but it really feels like he put some effort into being close to his audience. So through the, for lack of a better term, I'll call them podcasts that he does on Patreon, through the fact of his releasing his books digitally to his fans. I know that way back when, I think that one of the first Jack Palms books was released as an audiobook, I think for free, if I remember correctly. So it seems like he does a lot to contribute, to give back to his listeners, which is really, or his readers, I guess, and listeners, but really, really cool.
Yeah, I think I'm giving I'm not giving a ton of money on his Patreon per month. I want to say it's like $3 a month. And what I get out of that is he does, he's serializing Maltese Jordans, but he's also releasing chapters of like audiobook chapters of his other novels. And he does these office hours thing where he basically just like talks about what he's up to and the craft and all that kind of stuff. And this is a guy, a guy talking about the craft who also for his day job teaches online creative writing for Harvard and Stanford. Like, you can pay a couple bucks and get advice from someone who like teaches at Ivy League schools, which I think is a great value.
Agreed. So I don't have a ton else to say about the book. I would like to thank Seth for the shout out on page 9 to Rent-A-Center, my former employer.
I saw that. Oh man, I forgot to mention that. That's so good.
Yeah. I for those of you who don't know, I worked for Rent-A-Center for a period of time. I believe that period of time was 7 years. One day we'll do a podcast where I just reminisce and tell stories about working at Rent-A-Center. If you want to talk about an interesting business to be in, that's the one.
You just gave me a great idea. We do a Patreon level where we just basically podcast talking about our everyday lives.
Jesus. Well, I don't know. Nowadays, my everyday life is boring. At Rent-A-Center, though, there was a lot of very interesting stuff. I'll put it to you this way: it's only interesting in retrospect.
Yeah.
Like, I really hated my life then and the people I had to deal with and the situations I got into. But God damn it, it makes for great stories after the fact.
Yeah.
We should probably throw some stars on this book. You wanna go ahead and do that first?
Yep. All right. So I've always been a big fan of Seth. We had him. I think I mentioned it. We had him a story of his in the book anthology called To the Bone, which is far more violent and gruesome than what the Jack Palms book is. So I always had him kind of pegged as this guy who does really gritty, violent, like crime fiction. So the Jack Palms book being on the lighter side as far as a detective novel was a little different, but so well written that I just fell right into it. It was so easy to read. It clocks in around just over 300 pages according to Amazon. But man, it reads fast and it reads easy and it's entertaining the whole way. His take on a detective novel is very refreshing because it's just it's much more down to earth, like we mentioned earlier when we were talking about the book, and so it's just so accessible, and it was very nice. His information that he shares about the world of Sneds is, as far as I'm aware, very accurate as well. I have a sneakerhead that I work with, and we were talking a little bit about this book, and he was listening to our conversation with Seth last year, and he said to me, the guy that I work with, that it's obvious that Seth is someone who's not just trying to talk about this phenomenon, he's actually in it, and he knows what he's talking about. So if you're a sneakerhead and you pick this up because it's a book called The Maltese Jordans, and you're wondering, or you're listening to this because of that, and you're wondering, is this really going to sound authentic? I would say it probably will. And so I don't know, I just like everything about this book, and the way that he weaves the story of the Maltese Jordans in, not only with like the sneakerhead community, but also with like the scandals and goings on of sports in the mid 90s, which also tracks very truthfully with the history of that time. It just all works very well. The ending was great. Livius might say something about the ending. I think the ending was great, and it was very tight and very clean and just very satisfying. So I really can't find much to pick at this book about. And so, yeah, 5 stars.
Last week I did write this down, so I'm kind of going from memory. I'd said there's like 3 levels of detective novel. So there was like the hard-boiled crime novels. Then you had something like The Nice Guys, which we reviewed, which was like light and a little silly, a lot of good dialogue, like buddy cop humor. And then you had like the Adventures of Ford Fairlane, like in the level of the absurd, right? So Seth has now shown me there's a level in between like the hard-boiled detective novels and that like the nice guys, like a nice, serious, but light detective novel. And this was a lot of fun. I didn't know. I mean, even having heard the first few chapters, I didn't know where this was going to go. As I mentioned before, no idea where it was going to end up. But super, super satisfying for the ending. One of the best, like buttoned up. Like it left me wanting nothing more endings that I've read in a while. Quite honestly, the characters are interesting enough to keep you engaged with them. But they're not like he doesn't overcomplicate and try to make them super deep. We didn't get a million backstories about everyone's motivation and everything. Like we got just enough to be really interested in the characters. And I think that Seth did a really great job with this book. This is the 5th Jack Palm's book. The other 4 are available on Kindle, I believe, all for $2.99. I hate myself for doing this because I have zero time to read like on my own. But Jack Wakes Up is going to be added to my list of books that I want to read because I really want to see where Jack Palm started, and then who knows, perhaps go through the other ones. I'm really glad we took this one on, and yeah, I'm with Rob. This is a super enjoyable read. 5 stars.
Excellent. I kind of want to jump back to talking about Seth selling books on his website, and this is not me trying to get him to sell copies of anything by any means, but what I said about this book being available for sale goes for his other books as well. I think he had all of his Jack Palm's book reissued with like new covers, and they're all themed together, so like the covers are similar and everything. And he's selling them all, so like just go to SethHarwood.com and check it out if you're interested in those books. Buy them straight from the author. I'm sure he's going to get the most money that way anyway. So why not do that?
Yeah, if you want the paper book, I would say definitely pick the right route and go to the author and skip the convenience of Amazon.
Yeah. All right. What else we got going on in this world?
We have nothing going on. I did not know, and I sent Rob a message the other day, that Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock was being made into a movie. And of course, Rob responds with, yeah, I saw this like weeks ago. And I get real excited.
So, yeah.
I see something I think Rob's going to be excited about. Like I send him a link right away. Today I sent him a link, right, to season 2 of the Haunting of Hill House. And Rob's like, yeah, I saw that weeks ago. Thanks, Rob.
So, all right. So you brought that up not so much to talk about the fact that the book that we reviewed is being turned into a Netflix movie as much as to say that you care more about me than I care about you.
Clearly.
All right.
On both counts. Clearly I brought it up for that way, and clearly that's the case. So, yeah.
Sorry. I think that I'm just going to blame it on the fact that I see all this stuff really late at night and I know you're sleeping. So that's my cop out.
That's creepy too.
Well, the webcam shows me that you're sleeping. So
yeah, I better stock up on Post-it notes.
So we reviewed The Devil All the Time, man, in the first like probably 70 episodes of the podcast, maybe even the first 40. Right. And we liked it a lot. And you had read Knock 'em Stiff, which was
correct.
The earlier, which one was the collection? It was a short story collection.
Knock 'em Stiff was a short story collection.
The sad thing is that Pollock came out with another book like a year and a half ago. Heavenly Table, I think it's called, and we didn't get a chance to read it, so that was like kind of a bummer. I own the book, we just never got to read it, but man, awesome dude, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with, like, I feel like right now is the perfect time for books to be made into movies. It's just like there's just a movement of it right now, and like it's great to see all these books that we cared about and gave attention to back then getting adapted into films.
Sucks because it takes a long time, apparently.
Yeah.
Like these books are all from, so we read Devil All the Time. It would have been, 7 years ago, right? 2013, maybe? 2012?
September of 2011. Oh, my God.
Jesus. Yeah, so there you go.
It was episode 40.
Yeah. Bird Box. how long did it take us to see Bird Box, as a movie? So, it takes a long time. So ultimately, I say this all the time, but as an author, you write a book, you actually get published with a publisher. So then you got to wait 18 months to 2 years to do that. Then if the book is okay, it takes another 3 or 4 years to make a movie. So it's like, the rest of us don't really have, and I'm sure there's some exceptions, where the work that we do today, we're like hanging on and waiting for something to happen with it 6 years from now.
Right.
But as a writer, or if you're an aspiring writer, just remember that. Remember that your baby that you finally put down, you got really excited about, you sold. It'll be 2 years before anybody reads it, and then probably another 3 or 4 before anybody makes it into a movie. But the nice thing is, I guess it keeps paying that way, right? So a movie comes out and you sell more books. Josh Malerman wound up on the New York Times bestseller list in the top 10, I believe.
Yeah, for at least 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, after Bird Box came out, something that did not happen, unfortunately and unfairly, when the book first came out, because it was every bit as good of a book then as it was after it was a movie.
Yep.
But yeah, kudos to Donald Ray Pollock. I'm looking forward to that. Frank Bill's movie coming out, book/movie coming out shortly. So lots of good stuff coming up from a movie standpoint.
Yeah, and the thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about that is, like, when we read and talked about this book 7.5 years ago. Did I do the math right on that?
Yeah.
Ish.
Almost 7.5, yeah.
It's not like part of the conversation was, oh, it'll be great when we see that movie 9 years from now. Like, we never even occurred to us. No. So, like, now that we've been doing the podcast so long, it seems like that's going to be a common occurrence, where it's like this thing that we had something to say about half a decade ago or more is now back in our lives in a new, like, incarnation, and then we have to, like, tackle the fact that it exists now this different way. It's kind of an exciting time for the podcast because it's happening very frequently, and I get the feeling that it's just going to keep happening.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we know a few of the properties have been bought. Some of them are already in development. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's always that possibility. Last Projector 2024.
Oh man, I'm fingers crossed for that. Like, and especially if David James Keaton has something to do with the production of the film.
There's no way any sane producer is letting him anywhere fucking near anything like that. And now that I said that, it would have to be like one of those really weird guys, and I can't think of the names. It was like, what's that weirdo's name that did Antichrist, and he does like all the weird.
Lars von Trier.
Yeah, it would have to be like that guy. Would have no one else. No one else would look at that thing and be like, I'm going to be the one that adapts it into a movie. Yeah,
weird art house shit.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you're right. It is fun and interesting for us to see these things come to fruition. And of course, I mean, some of these people, as a matter of fact, the ones we've just mentioned, have all been guests on this podcast and people that we consider friends. So it's not just exciting because we read this book and now it's a movie. I've been doing that my whole life. These are people that I've gotten to know and or talk to about their work, and hopefully we'll talk to again about the stuff they're doing. So it's even cooler to see somebody that, we consider a friend, gain that kind of notoriety or success. Again, even if it's stupid and unfair the way it is a Josh Malerman situation where that's the measure of success, but I'm still really excited for all of them.
Yeah, and not to put too fine a point on it, but I feel like there's two approaches to like a situation. We'll just use Bird Box as an example. There's the approach where it's like, I'm going to get attention for myself by talking about how I knew this person who is now blowing up for some reason. And then there's I just want to talk about the fact that my friend got a really cool thing that happened in his life. Yep. And if you ever are listening to this and are thinking that we're the first people, that's never the case. Never the case. We're genuinely happy for Josh and the things that are happening with Bird Box. It has nothing to do with the fact that we talk, like, we don't, we're not saying, hey, we're awesome because we knew him first. We're just happy for our dude.
Yep. And we picked a winner. That's the other thing too.
I mean,
if when we really loved a book like that,
it validates our taste a little bit, but
Absolutely.
that's like a personal thing.
Absolutely.
More than, Yeah. We've always known that we've got good taste, though. So, like, this is just so you guys also know.
Speaking of Josh Mallerman, we're getting closer and closer to StokerCon, where we plan, hopefully, on I'm hoping we can have Josh on sooner to talk about his new book, Inspection. But I also expect that we'll spend a little bit of time with him at StokerCon coming up in 3 months. 3 months from now. Less than 3 months from 2.5 months from now. Yep.
That's coming up. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think John F.D. Taff said he would be there, so it'd be
for sure.
Cool to spend some time with him in person, meet some other people. Who am I supposed to get an interview with?
Dude, you're so bad at this, you don't even know.
Is it McCammon?
Yeah, Robert R. McCammon.
Right. There we go. I'll get that. I'll make it happen.
So McCammon, I was reading. I remembered the other day I was thinking about StokerCon and Robert McCammon, and I will tell you, and maybe this happens a lot to people, but I vividly remember, so very briefly for a number of months when I was a senior in high school, I part-time cleaned a hair salon, like an hour or two a night. Like that was my gig. And I was there, and I don't remember what the situation was, but it was something like, well, I was just going to hang out there because I had to go somewhere else after, but it was like too early to go. And I was reading Wolf's Hour by Robert McCammon. And next thing you know, like I'd spent like 2 hours sitting in a hairstylist's chair just reading this book. Now, I'm telling you, this is when I was probably like 18, maybe 17, 18, 19 on the outside. I don't remember exactly what age, but like that's 25 plus years ago that I'm remembering where I was sitting when I read this book. That's so I've been a huge fan of McCammon for that long. So for anybody who's not familiar, he's probably best known for Swan Song. Whenever anybody talks about post-apocalyptic good versus evil books, the two that always come up are The Stand and Swan Song. Personally, I liked Swan Song better. Although I really like The Stand too, so I'm not trying to shit talk Stephen King and his epic masterpiece, but Swan Song edged it out for me. So I'm super excited to hopefully get a chance to spend a little bit of time talking to Robert McCammon.
Fingers crossed. That would be very cool. So yeah, that's what's coming up. We're probably gonna be talking to Seth in the next episode. More books to come. We got that Inspection book by Mallerman coming up. There's a handful of things coming up in the next few months that are pretty exciting.
Indeed. But next week, Seth Harwood, that's what we're excited about currently. And until then, I'm Olivia Snedden.
And I'm Rebels, and keep reading.